Hey there, it's Carrie Kenner, and welcome to my weekly vlog. So, I often hear from people who want to be a doula. Now, 20 years ago, very few people knew what a doula was. Nowadays, it's a really common term, and people around the world often know what a doula is. But one of the tricky things is that there's many different kinds of doulas. There's birth doulas and postpartum doulas, which are probably the most common ones. But there's also death or end of life doulas. There's full spectrum doulas. There's even divorce and surgery doulas. So what's the difference between all these doulas and what's the right one for you? So I'm going to focus on birth and postpartum doulas in this episode. But you're going to see how, when you learn how to be a doula, you can apply it to pretty much anything that you're interested in that's challenging. Now, you may question that truth, but I'm going to tell you a little story about how I learned that for myself. So, I had been a birth doula for about 10 years when I took a death doula training. And in the first hour of the death doula training, I kept shouting, "That's just like being a birth doula. That's just like being a birth doula." By lunchtime, I'd probably said it 10 times, and by the end of the day, I could tell I was seriously annoying people and that I had to shut up. So for the rest of the 3-day training, I just kept shouting in my head, "Oh my God, that's just like being a birth doula. That's just what we do at birth. That's just what we do with our clients." So I spent a little bit of time dissecting why that was. Why did I think these roles that were clearly at the different end of the spectrum had so much in common? And what I realized is that the core of being a doula is being in service to people who are going through a challenging, often physically or emotionally charged experience. So think back to a time where you went through something challenging and it didn't end up so well. At every turn where you felt unsure, unknowing, afraid, or pressured, someone would have been on your team. They couldn't have turned back the hands of time or done anything superhuman, but someone would have had your back and you wouldn't have been alone. Everyone's experience is different. So, how do you learn skills then that can apply to all people in all these situations? When I train doulas, I often hear, "But isn't it my job to protect people from these bad things happening, for to preventing them from having the thing that happened to me?" And the answer is no, it's not. In fact, I often ask them, "Why do you think it's your job to protect people? It's their journey. Who are you to prevent them from learning their own life lessons, from having their own hard challenges that they get through and make meaning of? Your job is simply to support and witness them on their path." Doulas don't tell people what to do or even how to do it. They help them find their own way. So, how do doulas do that? They recognize the core principles of being a doula. They recognize that birth, postpartum, fill in the blank, are rites of passage, and that people go through emotional, physical, and spiritual changes after they emerge from the experience. They recognize the inherent autonomy and respect that all people deserve when going through a challenging experience. And they acknowledge the existing systems that people have to move through and engage in that don't serve all the emotional, physical, and spiritual needs of people going through those experiences. They understand the intersection of racial and social injustice within those systems and how they impact the experiences and outcomes of marginalized people. They believe that people are innately capable of navigating challenging situations, and they know that compassion, preparation, support, and being seen makes those challenges more doable. They see themselves as a bridge or a stopgap measure when they're working within those systems to help their clients receive the holistic support they need at the same time as trying to improve those systems for long term change. And they understand that significant experiences can have lifelong impacts in people. And so they help people to process those experiences and make meaning of them after the fact. When you look at the doula role from that perspective, you may be thinking, "Wow, that's a lot. That's heavy." Yes, it is. And that's what makes the doula role so necessary in the world today. I often say the doula role is the most nuanced profession you've never heard of. Now, doulas are able to uphold those principles with a unique set of skills, which, when combined together, help them to perform the exquisitely nuanced role of the doula. Here are those skills: emptying their cup of their own ideas of how the process should go, developing communication skills, especially how to ask open ended questions, listen deeply, and observe with curiosity, getting familiar with their client, what's important to them, and their specific desires and outcomes, using interpersonal skills to support the relationship between the client, their chosen support people, professional staff, and the doula, and translating the client's past experiences into how they can be useful in the upcoming experience. For example, translating what one's experience in grad school, how it might relate to going through labor, being emotionally and physically present for their clients, and accessing intuitive skills, specifically how to read a room and notice shifting energy and what's unfolding around them, knowing about the birth process, knowing about the perinatal care system, knowing about comfort measures and strategies for coping with labor, knowing about medical conditions in labor and birth and options for addressing them. All those last four things, those are things that are unique to the field that a doula works in. So those are the topics of those are going to change, but people do need to have some expertise in the field that they're working in. Doulas also need to keep their personal stories and opinions to themselves and instead share allegorical stories as a means to educate and offer options. They need to advocate for people in a way that doesn't take their power away, and asking for consent before offering ideas or an intervention. They need networking and resource skills so that they can gather information, family support, and community. They need to be trauma informed, and they need to know how to be diplomatic while changing the world. So, as you can see, the above list doesn't include a lot about doing the double hip squeeze, nursing positions, or baby wearing techniques. All that stuff is the cherry on top after learning how to provide the skills I just mentioned. Now, I'm 100% certain that if you're interested in birth, you are already learning about the stages of labor and labor support techniques. You're watching copious numbers of videos on YouTube, you're binging birth related podcasts, and you're reading every book you can get your hands on. And if postpartum is your jam, you're learning about postpartum depression, perinatal healing, and how babies sleep. You're going to learn more of those things and potentially more accurate information in your formal doula training. But what really makes you a doula are those core principles I mentioned at the beginning. So now that we take a look at the bigger picture of being a doula, we can understand how doulas can be helpful for any challenging experience, such as miscarriage, infertility, abortion, adoption, death, marriage or wedding planning, divorce, surgery, cancer care, psychedelic journeys. The list goes on and on. With the core principles of being a doula and specific skills, you can be a doula for anything. I'm often asked if you have to be an expert in the field you want to practice in. No, you just need to know all those magic doula skills and learn the specific knowing things that I mentioned above for your chosen field. And you don't need to know it all. You just need to know a little bit more than your client about the systems they'll interact with, the emotional processes most people experience, the physical processes they can expect, and the spiritual impact this may have on your client. If you've already gone through the experience yourself, you'll probably already be there. Being a doula is one of the most rewarding jobs in the world, but it's more than a job. It's an identity, a calling, an act of service. It's also an entirely unique role because so few people know what it is, much less how to do it. If you're thinking about becoming a birth doula, I have the most affordable, comprehensive, and accessible online birth doula training out there. I made it that way because I don't think people should have to invest a lot of money and time to start becoming a doula and find out if it's right for them. Visit carriekenner.com and click on birth doula training to learn more. That's what I've got for you this week. Thanks for being here. See you next week.